Hello and welcome to a special edition of NTV. I'm Julian Esparza. 50 years ago today, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated right here in downtown Dallas. On November 22, 1963, citizens lined these streets to catch a glimpse of the president, but for a select few, they saw more than they ever could have imagined. Bill and Gail Newman were the closest to civilians to JFK when he was assassinated. I spoke with them at their home in Saxe. The date is November 22, 1963. Bill and Gail Newman, along with their two young children, eagerly await the arrival of the president. The family had been anticipating the visit for months, and even waited for the president's plane to land at Love Field Airport. The Newmans say that prior to the shooting, they were doing anything they could to catch a glimpse of the president.
Julian, we got up that Friday morning and got dressed to drive out to Love Field to see the President and Mrs. Kennedy arrive in Dallas. And we timed it so we could get there just about the time the plane would land. On arriving at Love Field, there was a large crowd of people. I had Clayton with me, our youngest son, and Clayton and myself were able to get right up to the fence, and we got very close to the President and Mrs. Kennedy as they went by. But Gail and Billy, our oldest son, were 5 or 6 people deep behind us and did not get a very good view of them. So we just jumped in our car and proceeded downtown, and we ended up there on Elm Street between Houston and the Triple Underpass.
As President Kennedy turned onto Elm Street and the first shots rang out, the Newmans, like most witnesses, thought that the shots were just harmless firecrackers.
I think Gail had about the same reaction. I didn't recognize it as a gunshot at that moment.
Once the Newmans realized what was happening, they did what any parent would do. They threw themselves on the ground and covered their children. After that, they saw the third fatal shot. Their description of the shooting is quite graphic and may be disturbing to some people.
Just as the car passed in front of us and the third shot rang out and the side of President Kennedy's head blew off, I recall Mrs. Kennedy hollering, "Oh my God, no, they've shot Jack." And of course, looking back towards the car, saw the Secret Service man come up over the back of the car and push them down, and then of course it took off.
50 years have passed, but many people still think there was a conspiracy. The Newmans say that of all the possible theories they've heard, they do not like to associate themselves with any particular theory.
Julian, I can take either position on that. You know, we've been so tainted over the years with people and their theories, it would be easy for me to support either premise.
The Newman's children, Clayton and Billy, were both younger than the age of 5 at the time of the shooting, but Mrs. Newman says that Billy seemed to remember the events of that day.
Billy was 4 years old and Clayton was 2. Clayton doesn't remember anything, but Billy seems to think that he remembers, and he asked questions about it after we came home several days later. He came and got in my lap and he said, "Oh, Mom, did you see all that blood, and why did they shoot that man?" And I tried to explain to him that there's, bad people in the world that do bad things.
While most people would have never wanted to witness the assassination, the Newmans say that although they saw a president killed, they realized that they have a special mark on history.
Right after it happened, I sort of wished that, we had not been there. But we realized that we were a part of history, and it would never go away until, we died.
The assassination had a major impact on the people of Dallas, and the Newmans in particular. And 50 years later, this shooting still haunts the city of Dallas. John F. Kennedy is known to be one of the greatest presidents in United States history. Baxter Pitt has the story on the legacy and the impact that JFK had on the United States.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the 35th President of the United States, elected in 1960 and assassinated before the end of his first term in 1963.
But we shall always hope to find them strongly supporting their own freedom.
He came from an upper-class family in Massachusetts and was the second of 4 brothers. His 2 younger brothers, Robert Kennedy and Edward Kennedy, would go on to be prominent political players in the 20th century, but it was John who would be the crown jewel in the Kennedy political empire. After attending the Choate School for his high school years, he went to Harvard University, graduating with a Bachelor of Science with honors in international affairs.
Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
Kennedy's next move was to enlist in the U.S. Navy, where he would serve during World War II on the Pacific Front. After his boat was all but destroyed by a Japanese vessel, Kennedy managed to tow several of his injured crewmen to shore on a nearby island, earning himself a Navy and Marine Corps medal in the process.
Kennedy, 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 Kennedy,
From here, Kennedy began his political career. He was elected 3 times to the 11th Congressional District of Massachusetts and then to the United States Senate. Finally, in 1960, Kennedy began his campaign for the presidency.
Rebuild our military strength, not because we want to declare war, but because we want to declare peace.
Kennedy faced an uphill battle against incumbent Vice President Richard Nixon. However, his youth and promise to get the nation moving again gave him the slight advantage he needed to win one of the closest elections in U.S. history.
Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.
As president, Kennedy managed to navigate the United States through the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the most tense moments of the Cold War, established the Peace Corps, and perhaps most notably, he inspired the nation and called them to
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Perhaps Kennedy's greatest legacy was something he wasn't able to complete during his short time in office, but his contribution and support was what made it possible. For more on this, we turn to AP U.S. History teacher Mrs. Tanya Smith.
I think the greatest legacy of JFK is the civil rights movement and his support of it. Though he doesn't support the civil rights movement at the beginning, he does support it towards the end of his life, which gave a lot of power and credibility to those leaders to help push through. The Civil Rights Act is signed into effect under LBJ. However, without JFK giving his support to it right towards the end of his life, it wouldn't have been possible.
Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Finally, it is the exceptionalism he inspired and played into, American exceptionalism, which said,
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
In this, JFK left a lasting legacy that could not be extinguished by his death nor tarnished by the ravages of time. This is Baxter Pitt for NTV.
50 years have passed since the assassination, but some of the people who were alive at the time are still alive today. We spoke with some teachers at North who recollect the events from that terrible day. Lauren Dodge has the story.
In your youth, concepts such as politics and death are usually harder to comprehend. This suggests John F. Kennedy's assassination probably affected adults more than the younger generations. Mr. Kirk, marketing teacher, was in 4th grade at the time of the assassination. He recalls that seeing his mother's reaction affected him more than anything that day.
You know, it's the president's just somebody out there when you're in the 4th grade. You don't really think about them. But when you see your mom that upset, it upsets you.
Miss White, Beta House secretary, also recollects her mother's heartbroken reaction to the catastrophe.
Well, my mom, bless her heart, she didn't vote for anybody for a while because she was so, heartbroken because she really, had high hopes for him.
News of the tragedy that day quickly traveled, but soccer coach and history teacher Coach Sills didn't need to hear from the news. He witnessed the events firsthand.
Well, actually, I was in downtown Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, with my dad, and I was standing at the corner of Main and Houston Street. And we basically were waiting for the president to drive by, and when he actually did drive by, he was actually maybe 5 or 6 feet away from me. And I was kind of standing on the corner there. I had moved around the corner, and as I saw him coming, I mean, he was like right there. I could have actually stepped off the curb and touched him. That's how close I was.
Because he was so close to the scene, Coach Sills actually heard the gunshots, and he has a clear memory of the aftermath of the third shot.
I remember seeing the serviceman basically jump up on the back of the limo, and as he was doing that, the president's wife was coming to the back of the limo on the trunk area, and then of course the car sped off.
While Coach Sills remembers the shooting vividly, Miss White still gets emotional about the events that followed.
It hurt to see the family and to see how John, when he saluted his dad, when the casket was coming through. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. And every time I think about it. But
50 years later, people are still intrigued by the tragedy, and Coach Sills does his best to educate people on what he witnessed.
During the summers, I go down and I speak to different people about, that day and what it was like, and I do some stuff for the Sixth Floor Museum. People are still very curious. The big deal is, is it a conspiracy,
Following the assassination, there are many different complex theories on how it was devised. However, Mr. Kirk believes it was pretty simple.
Personally, I think it was just one crazy guy that decided to go try to get famous.
The 50th anniversary of the assassination has brought on a lot of news coverage about the shooting in the Kennedy family, and Miss White doesn't think it'll ever end.
oh gosh, it's never died down. It's always come up with the little boy, John Jr., and Caroline, and anytime Jackie did anything, they always came back. But oh no, it took maybe a year, but still, you talk about the Kennedys, and that assassination always comes back. I don't think it's going to die down ever.
This is Lauren Dodge for NTV.
That's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend, Bulldogs.